Proverbs 18, verse 11, what I had marked. So that's where we'll pick up this evening. And so, the rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own esteem. And so we're going to go to 1 Timothy 6:17. I don't think we went to this last week, so correct me if I'm wrong, if we'll jump to the next one. But here, this is not the only place in the Bible that talk about or give warnings against riches. In fact, there's more verses in 1 Timothy chapter 6 that talk about this. But the rich man's wealth is his strong city. And so, we're talking about an individual's confidence, right? What's he put his confidence in? Himself. Anyway, so his strong city, that's his place of safety, of comfort, right? What happens to riches? They come and go, right? They come and go, okay? And so 1 Timothy 6 and verse 17 says, command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who gives us richly all things to enjoy. Who gives it? God gives it, okay? Job, when you go to the book of Job, Job chapter 1, as we're introduced to Job, what's one of the, other than him being a righteous man, what's one of the first things we realize about Job? He's a wealthy man, right? And in a few verses, what happens to his wealth?
He's poor.
Yeah, he's poor. It goes away, okay? And so, it says, let them do good, that they may be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share, storing up for themselves a good foundation for the time to come, that they may hold fast on eternal life. So the rich man's wealth is a strong city, and like a high wall in his own esteem. That's his protection, isn't it? If something happens, I've got money. If anything happens, I'll buy my way out of it. And so, but riches come and go. And so, I think it's, in fact, we just happen to be overlapping material because I started at Bethany for a Sunday morning. I just finished a three-part sermon over 3 weeks. We talked about this a little bit. But when I was studying for that, it says, command those who are rich in the world. And you think about that, statistically speaking, Americans are richer than 98% of the rest of the world. We're the top 2%, right? So with that in mind, when you read this, it says, command those who are Americans in this present age, right? You don't like that, Sue Ann? It makes us feel uncomfortable, right? But statistically speaking, that's who we are. So this is something we need to be careful of. How many people in the world trust in their riches? Don't know a percentage, but we know a lot, right? Is that something in the church that we struggle with sometimes? I think individually it's something we struggle with. So we need to be careful of that. Riches come and go. Verse 12, before destruction. We didn't put a section on this. Section 12, poverty and wealth, right? Okay. Might be a good place to put this. Verse 12, it says, before destruction the heart of man is haughty, and before honor is humility. We say pride goes before what? Yeah. Is that the principle that's being taught here? Before destruction, the heart of a man is exalted, right? It's lifted up. And before honor comes what? What do we have to do to be honored? Jesus said in John 12 and verse 32 says, and if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me, right? And when we realize Christ going to the cross, that's the display. We see the display of his great love, right? But you go to Philippians 2 verses 5 through 8, and we see that what did Christ have to do to go to the cross? What did he do? He humbled himself, right? To become obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. He humbled himself in that. Does that mean that God or Christ wasn't humble? Was he humble before he came to this earth? Yeah. But he was showing us the example of leaving that high position, taking a lower position, and being lifted up. Go to Mark 9:35 here when Jesus is talking to his disciples. Maybe a verse you thought of when we're talking about this verse. What verse did I give you? Did I say Matthew or Mark? It's Mark 9:35. Yep, Mark 9:35. If you're there, feel free to read it.
And he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, if anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all.
Okay, right. Servant, a humble position, right? Before he can be lifted up. Okay. Any questions or comments about this verse? Okay. Where should we put this? Section 27, maybe a joy and fulfilled life. What's the most fulfilling life we can live? Christian. And Christian is a servant, right? You can't be a Christian without being a servant. All right, verse 13 says, he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him. And so when you think about this, we're going to look at this also later on. There's another verse that talks about this similar statement. He who answers a matter before he hears it, right? What do we say about stories? There's always two sides to every story, right? And then there's the truth, right? Yeah. And so when you're dealing with people of honor, you hope that what? That what they're saying is the truth, right? But a lot of times we struggle because of perception, right? And so I think an illustration I heard a long time ago that applies to this, helps us understand it, is if you were to be sitting on a hill and looking down at railroad tracks, and here's a car that's coming down the highway, and you see the train, and they're going to intersect, and you see the incident, the train hit the car, and then you look across the tracks to the other side, you see somebody else standing there, and they saw the same incident, and so both of you are trying to explain to the officials on scene what happened, and one of you says the train came from the left and one came from the right. Who's right? Yeah, okay. And sometimes that's our problem because we're standing on one hillside and we have a disagreement. Sometimes it's because that's just the way we see it, right or wrong, right? So we need to be careful. But he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him, okay? Also, we can talk about premature judgment, right? And when you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, one of the things that Paul talks about is think no evil. What's he talking about? Presumptuous statements or ideas about somebody. We need to be careful, right? And so in 1 Kings chapter 3, we don't have to go there. But after Solomon received the gift of wisdom, right? You have two ladies, women, that come to him, maybe not ladies, but women that come to him. And what does he do? He listens to both sides. I think that's a great example of this, of what Solomon was talking about. What if the one woman came running in and he listened to her side? Yeah. Now, just honestly, which story is normally right in our minds?
Well, if you listen to the news, it's the one talking the loudest.
Okay. Or the first one.
Or the first one.
Yeah, the first one. That's what I thought. It's like the first one.
Sometimes you draw a conclusion with the first one. And then
So when you think about
it might not be right.
the attitude or characteristics of a talebearer, what do they often try to do?
Twist it in an edge.
Win first.
They want to be the first one to get to you.
That's right, to slant the view. Okay, so we as Christians, we hear things, and we shouldn't be trying to entertain those things, but there's sometimes another perspective, sometimes a better perspective, so we need to be careful of that. All right. The first liars never got a chance. Yeah. And we'll look at that a little bit more. So maybe section 11, the tongue, right? And so we need to make sure that we're not a part of that, but we go get the truth. Okay. 14, it says, the spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? And so we have a section here, the human heart, broken spirit, section 5. I think that's where we're going to put this. But here's the thing. Which would you rather have, a broken heart or a broken body? Which one's harder to get over?
Gee, that's tough. When you're old.
That's tough.
When you're older, that's tough.
There was a fella at Harrisonville, Barb would know him, and his name was Jim, and he'd always come in, you'd ask him how he's doing, and he'd say, well, I woke up this morning. He says, any day you wake up's got to be a good day. And one day he didn't wake up, right? He didn't have a good day. But you think about that. And so his attitude helped carry him through a lot of sickness. And so when you look at some studies, some information, that you can see that a broken spirit can cause a lot of physical pain. It can, right? So we as Christians. And so what do Christians have to be upset about? We really get down to it. Okay, we've got great things to look forward to. And so why should we as Christians have a broken spirit? If we can get our attitude right, it'll get us through the difficult times physically. Okay. All right, any questions or comments? All right, verse 15 says, the heart of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. A prudent individual is one that's proactive, right? And what are they trying to do? Okay, better themselves. And that's the idea here. Understand. Okay. Solomon in Ecclesiastes told us that there's no end to learning, right? And so, as a young person, I went through fire school, and you're like, boy, we're going to learn everything. And so through the hazmat portion, then I remember one of the things that the instructor talked about was, if some of you guys know about the ERGs or the orange books that have all the emergency numbers you call an emergency when you have a hazardous spill. And so what they taught us was that if you go to school to specialize in a hazardous material like anhydrous ammonia or diesel fuel or acid, there's a whole list, hundreds of things. If you go to school, and I guess it'd be, chemistry? I don't know what it is. But anyway, if you go to school for that, then you master in one chemical your whole career. You choose a chemical, and that is the focus of your career for your studies. And so they said that there's so much to know about all these chemicals that a person could spend an entire lifetime, entire career becoming a specialist in that area, and when they die, there's things they won't know about it. Okay? So with that in mind, we go back and we think about how does this apply to Proverbs, because when we die and stand before God, will God not care how much we know about diesel fuel? Okay. And so what we're talking about, the heart of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ears of the wise seek knowledge. What we're talking about is we're not talking about physical things as a focus. We want to understand things in life, but keep the important things, the big picture, right? Okay. And so really he's talking about discernment. And so do we seek to know or understand? Right? What's life all about? When you get to the end of Ecclesiastes, all the things that Solomon talked about, and all the things that Solomon got to see and be a part of, what did he say was most important? Well, that, but what is it? To serve God. That's it. Okay. That's our purpose here. So I think that verse 15 may be hard to put. Maybe we should just put under section 1, wisdom. Okay. And we should just have wisdom. We don't have to know everything to have good decision-making skills. Okay. 16 says, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. And so this almost sounded like, when I started preparing this, I said, this almost sounds like bribery, right? The gift brings him before great men, and that's not the case here. A man's gift makes room for him. And so maybe a word prudent should go in here, respectful, right? And so when we live as an honorable individual, upright, upstanding citizen, maybe a good word, then will great men be willing to listen to you? Now think about Paul, and I think this is a good example for what we're talking about in verse 16. When you think, we're talking about when we're respectful, especially towards those in authority, then it gains for ourselves a lot of favor. And that's not bribery. We're just being respectable individuals, being respectful of them, and honoring them and their authority and their position and their hard work. And so Paul, in Acts chapter 9, verse 15, then we see Jesus told Paul that he was going to be a chosen vessel, right? Who is he going to speak to? We say the Gentiles, which is right. But who are we also talking about? Kings and those in authority. And when you get to Acts chapter 26, and you see as Paul is making his journey to Rome, in order to get to Rome, he gets the opportunity to meet, stand before, and really visit with, interact with men of great authority. So if you go to Acts chapter 26, just real quick, and look at just verse 1, just real quick as we think about this. And so we don't really have the time this evening to look at all these chapters and the way that Paul acts and interacts with these individuals, but I'd encourage you to look at this in connection with what we're talking about. It says, then Agrippa said to Paul, you are permitted to speak for yourself. So Paul stretched out his hand and answered for himself, I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because today I shall answer for myself before you concerning all the things which I am accused of by the Jews. And he keeps going on this speech, but you'll notice when Paul would address Felix, Festus, Agrippa, anyone in authority, how did he address them? Was he respectful? With respect. And because of that, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him where? Before great men. If he was belligerent and angry and upset, would they have given him the time of day? Oh, okay. So that's what we're talking about here. And so with that, maybe section 24, the words of the wise, but this really applies to a lot of areas as far as how we conduct ourselves, where it will get us in life. And where we're able to go in life is where we're able to spread the gospel in life. So think about those things. Any questions or comments? All right. Verse 17 says, the first one to plead his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him. What do we talk about as we began our study this evening? The first story is always what?
First one heard.
The first one heard. Yeah. Say, well, it's good. What I heard first must make it right. But it says the first one to plead his cause seems right until what? And verse 17 is really focusing on the investigation of the subject, right? That investigation is due to find the truth. Again, we go back and we talk about Solomon. Was Solomon going to listen to the first story and say that must be it? You know, that's really a court case or a court trial that we see unfolding. What does he do? He gathers all the facts, and then what does he do? Makes his decision. You know, you think about an eldership in a congregation, right? Maybe someone says, I heard so-and-so's doing something, you know, and as elders overseeing the flock, they need to make sure that that's true or false, right? And then address it in the right manner, right? Okay. Questions or comments? Oh, where are we going to put this one? This one, I was going to put under a good name, and that's section 15, because here's the thing. We can ruin our reputation by doing what? Listening to the wrong story. Okay. All right, 18 says, or believing the wrong story. Casting lots causes contentions to cease and keeps the mighty apart. The mighty here, from what I understand, indicates that these are the ones who probably like to squabble and go back and forth. And they're trying to gain for them a position. They go back and forth. And the casting lots, is there any time in the Bible that we see casting lots taking place? Okay, there's two examples, right? And the two examples that was over Jesus' clothes at the cross, that was a fulfillment of prophecy. And then what was the other one we looked at yesterday morning Bible class? Choosing Matthias, right? The apostle. Okay. And the casting lots is an indication of putting it in God's hands, right?
But I just thought of it, that it's just a method of fixing the problem.
So we're going to roll a dice.
But both parties have to agree to the method.
So when and I read several commentators on this verse because I was trying to understand it, say casting lots, and so the one that made the most sense was the idea of this is an indication we're going to put it in God's hands and find a way to use wise judgment, right? And so, yeah, we don't have to do, that's not, for every decision we don't have to play paper, rock, scissors, or roll the dice, but it's an indication of what are we going to do. We're going to try to find a way to use wise judgment. Who gives us wise judgment? God does, right? And so the wisdom of God came out, when we look at Acts chapter 1, the wisdom of God came out in the casting of lots there, right? And so we asked the question, they said, we have these men that we think are qualified. How do we make the decision to choose these men? What did they do? They put it in God's hands. And that's what this is an indication of. This is, I think, difficult for us today because we don't live in a miraculous age, right? And so here, we're going to put out a fleece tonight to make our decision, right? Because God made the decision, that was with Gideon, right? And so we put out the fleece.
Those conflicts now need to be taken care of immediately.
Yeah.
Not wait until somebody comes to his senses or, reads the Bible and says, hey, this is the right thing for you.
So when we're looking to God for wisdom and decisions, right? And I think that's what this verse is talking about. The mighty men, they just want to squabble over it, right? When you step back, say, what's the right decision? How are we going to come to the conclusion of the right decision? It was the way that we see some examples of God choosing.
Jonah, they cast lots on him too.
Did they? I didn't
Yeah.
remember that one.
The man on the boat, when you're having a squabble, they were casting lots trying to figure out who was the worst,
Kind of like voting,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, well, it's a way of getting down to the person that's,
yeah.
Yeah. So
The stones, they got a pile of stones. And
Like a short
whoever gets
straw,
them.
too.
the short straw, yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, and said God will, through his providence work this out. I think about that, how many decisions have you had to make, and we pray about them, and we ask for the wisdom to know which is the right decision? Probably the right answer is not enough. But I know that several of us have had, conversations about events in our life. We say, we don't know what to do, and so we pray for a door to be open so we know it's the right decision, right? And so who are we looking for? Casting lots, we're looking for God to help us make that decision through wisdom. I don't know. I don't know what, when they chose the apostles, what was it? They cast lots, right? And so the best explanation I've had is it'd be something like a dice, but was it a dice? Was it a coin? They made a decision, caused a decision to be made, The Amish, they believe in casting lots. So when they choose a bishop or minister, they put some of them, they put a paper in a book, and then they pass out the books and the one with the paper in it, and they believe that's God choosing them. Anyway, I'm not Amish.
Be
But
like hot potato. You hope you didn't
open
get
your
that.
room. But
Yeah, go, ooh, I don't want that one.
you know, I'm not, when we think about seeking God's wisdom, I'm not looking for a miraculous indication. But I do think that a wise man is going to ask for God's guidance, and so that we're not striving like the mighty men, you know. Just
You're not
arguing
looking
about
for
it.
somebody to hold your hand, you're just looking for a way to get through it.
That's right.
Well, when you think about it, God already knew you would be in that situation. So
He's casting, he's got a lot for you to cast.
well, providentially, he can already have something planned out. I mean, prepared for you, you just gotta do it.
Look for it.
Well, at the cross, when they were casting lots, that was for something bad in my mind. So when I think
Menial.
about when I think about casting lots, I think of it as being not good.
When they did it under the old law, it was a belief that God had a hand in that miraculously to make that choice. So they were putting it in God's hands now.
And that's clear from Acts 1 that that's what happened there.
But the casting of lots for Jesus' clothes is a whole different thing. It's the same principle, but the same thing, but they weren't letting God make the choice for them. They were just saying, okay, we're gonna use chance, see who's gonna get what.
Maybe.
So it can mean two different things.
But it was still a way of determining what was going to happen. Yeah. 19 says, a brother offended is harder to win than a strong city, and contentions are like bars of a castle. And so you think about the brother offended represents a relationship, right? What are the hardest relationships to fix? The closest relationships to fix. Okay. And so this is something. And I didn't put the verse. We talked about it, I don't think it's last week, 2 weeks ago, talking about stopping a contention before it starts. It was in 17, wasn't it? Where was that at? Anyway, you can go back and reference that. But the idea is if we're wise, we'll realize, hey, we got to stop this before it affects the relationship, right? I think it's interesting. Of course, this is all written through inspiration. But when you go back, it says casting lots causes contentions to what? Cease. Find a way to make a decision before it gets out of hand. Why? Because a brother offended is harder to win than a strong city. And contentions are like what? What do bars do?
Lock you in.
Okay. They divide. They keep you in or out. Yeah. All those are right answers we're giving. But they divide. Someone who's not supposed to be in. And so it causes us, if our heart becomes hardened through a struggle with our brother, what do? We put bars up. Okay, so that's hard to overcome.
And if you cast law, whatever it is, you've taken it away from one person making that decision.
Yeah,
It's really, it is a chance.
yeah.
You're taking away bias,
So when we,
preconceived ideas.
growing up, the rule in the house was if somebody wanted a piece of the pie and there's one pie left, one person got to do what?
Cut it.
And the other one got to what?
The biggest
Yeah.
piece.
So in my mind, that's wisdom at work. That's a representation of casting lots, right? And so the one cutting always does what?
Tries to be.
You're going to be left with what's left over. Abraham let Lot do what?
Choose first.
Choose first, right? Yeah. And what did he choose?
Bad decision.
Best.
The
He
best.
chose what was
It's a
good.
bad decision. That's a whole discussion, isn't it, in and of itself? But anyway, the idea was it was not equally divided. And Lot clearly took for himself.
Physically,
Yeah, for himself physically.
yeah.
So anyway, all right, we just got a minute left. It says, a man's stomach shall be satisfied from the fruit of his mouth, from the produce of his lips he shall be filled. Really, we probably shouldn't have started this one. Verses 20, 21 go together pretty well because what we're looking at is you'll have to live with the words that you have spoken. True or false?
True.
what comes out of your mouth, and these two verses go together, so maybe we'll end here. We'll just pick up in 20. But anyway, we hear the phrase, they made their bed, now they have to. Yeah. And we make our bed most of the time with what? Anyway, all right, we'll pick up here. Thanks for your time and attention.